Dear participants, we'll begin the meeting in another 2 minutes time. There is a small technical issue that we have. The thing is, we forgot to upgrade the Zoom to our usual plan. So it is just now in the basic plan. I got lapsed yesterday night. So we didn't notice that. It is our mistake. So that is why we could accommodate only 100 participants here. Others could join in YouTube, but let me now check whether I can upgrade it right now so that more people can join. So spare just 2 minutes for me. Come back. Good morning to one and all present here. We are very sorry that we apologize for our mistake at the outset that we had a technical issue here. We could not accommodate more than 100 right now because our Zoom account, that extended participants account lapsed yesterday night. Usually we get a mail, but this time we were not intimated, so we couldn't do that. So I apologize for that mistake. So we have 100 participants here, and we have the other participants joining us from YouTube. I was so happy actually when the registration process was going on. Yesterday night, when I checked, I found that we had more than 1,930 or something yesterday itself registration. So I was so happy actually, but unfortunately we couldn't accommodate all of them. So this is the statistics which we had yesterday night. 1,934 people have registered. And among those 1,924, they're all from different parts of India and also outside India. We had representations from all the states of India. So that was a very happy thing. We had representations from all the states and also from 6 union territories. And there were registrations from 15 countries also. So it was we were so happy that we could host such a wonderful webinar. But sorry that many of them have to join us in YouTube. So only 56.9% of the total registrants are from Tamil Nadu, and the remaining are from the rest of Tamil Nadu. So it was a happy thing. I'm not wasting time. We'll go into the session right now. Let me now request the one of our second MA participants, Mrs. Ashmi K. Raj, to propose the formal welcome.
Distinguished delegates, participants, and contributors, a pleasant good morning to you all. It's my delight to extend my warm wishes on the behalf of Nesamani Memorial Christian College, Marthandam. It's my immense pleasure to deliver the welcome address in this valuable moment. First of all, I'd like to invite the presence of God Almighty in this glorious occasion. Next, it's my privilege to welcome the correspondent of our college, Advocate L. Rajadurai, who administrates the college in an eminent way. On the behalf of every single person here, I welcome you, sir. I take it as a pleasure to welcome our principal, Dr. K. Palraj, who authorized the webinar to be conducted in this fine day. Welcome you, sir. It's my honor to welcome our Oldwell resource person, Dr. Manashi Bora, Associate Professor in the Department of English at Gauhati University, Assam. We are fortunate to have you as a resource person here, ma'am. On the behalf of all the dignitaries and participants, I welcome you, ma'am. It's my pleasure to welcome Professor Tibi Thomas, Head of the Department and IQAC Coordinator, who took efforts to conduct this webinar. Welcome you, sir. I also take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Abin, the webinar co-convener to this meeting on the behalf of the gathering. I welcome you, Mr. Abin. It's my immense pleasure to welcome all the delegates of the college IQAC cell who took steps to conduct the webinar in this fine day. I take it as a glory to welcome all the staff and students from various universities and colleges all over India who has been here as participants of this webinar. Welcome you all to this wonderful section. Hope this session will be useful to you all. Once again, I take this opportunity to welcome you on and all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashmi. Let me now request the principal of our college, Dr. K. Palraj, to give the presidential address or few words in this occasion. I think principal had was here, and I think he left the meeting. He has some technical issue. Maybe he'll join later. So let me now go ahead with our main program. We are very happy to have Dr. Manishri Bora, the Associate Professor in the Department of English of Gauhati University, Assam, as the resource person. So let me say a few words about her. Okay, she's at present, she's the Associate Professor of in the Department of English of Gauhati University. And her PhD thesis was on the French feminist, Luz Irigaray. She has a postgraduate diploma in the teaching of English, that is PGDT from Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages. At present, it is English and Foreign Language University, Hyderabad. And she teaches both English literature, language, and linguistics. And she has worked on different areas like translation, literary theory, women's studies, and so on. Her translations on folk narratives of Assam are included in the book Mothers, Daughters, and Others, Representation of Women in the Folk Narratives of Assam, published by Abilak. That is Anandoram Burua Institute of Language, Art, and Culture of Assam. She has also edited an anthology of poems titled A Treasury of English Poetry, from William Blake to Seamus Heaney. This was published by the Gauhati University Press. She has also written a critical introduction to Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own and Oliver Goldsmith's She Stoops to Conquer for DC Books and Easy Media, Bengaluru. And she has also involved in a lot of other training programs. And she has also involved in the training air traffic control officers at Gauhati Airport. And at present, she is busy working or looking at the representations of the experiences of agitation and insurgency in Assam during the 1980s in the literary texts. So we have such a renowned person as the chief guest or the person to deliver today's lecture. She is going to talk on history, memory, and trauma in recent literary texts, especially from with special focus on Assam. So I welcome Dr. Manishri Bora on behalf of the Department of English, the PG Association, Nesamani Memorial Christian College, on behalf of the principal, correspondent, and the members of the faculty. I welcome you, and I hand over the session to you, madam.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome and a very good morning to everybody. Yeah, I would like to thank the PG English Association and Internal Quality Assurance Cell, Nesamani Memorial Christian College, Kanyakumari, for giving me this opportunity to speak to you and to share with you my thoughts and my readings on a topic I'm engaged with at the moment. I just hope I'm audible. Please tell me if I become inaudible.
Yes, you're audible. Yeah.
Audible. So I will just share my thoughts, and I have read a few texts. They are literary texts from Assam, and maybe we can have a discussion later. A special thank you to Professor T.B. Thomas for contacting me and for getting me here. So this is a topic that that I'm engaged with at the moment, and it's a topic which is close to my heart. And the texts which I will use to talk about history, memory, and trauma are literary texts from Assam. Some of these texts are written in English. Okay? The authors wrote them in English. Some of them were written in Assamese, the regional language, and they be translated into English. And some exist only in the regional language version. So I will take a number of writers. They are women writers, as well as they are male writers. Now to go on to discussion. So literature is affected to a great extent by the socio-cultural and political milieu. Major world events like the World Wars, the Holocaust, and the 9/11 incident have inspired creativity in different genres of literature, as well as the visual arts. Different regions of the world have witnessed upheavals for different regions, and these have left their imprints on the psyche of the people and their literary and artistic productions. So these literary and artistic productions, they are retrospective reconstructions of the upheavals that take place for different reasons, different parts of the world. And that is how, since they are retrospective reconstructions, we get involved in issues like history, issues of memory, and also trauma. I would like to begin by talking a little about some ideas on history, memory, and trauma, which have been put forward by theorists working on those fields. So all of us know about Hayden White's seminal essay, The Historical Text as a Literary Artifact, which dismantled the opposition between literature and history. We do not now believe that history gives us privileged access to the truth. In history too, as in literature, there is emplotment, there is narrativization, and the point of view of the historian. So history has certain features of literature. So since history has certain features of literature, literature can also be read for knowledge about certain historical periods, certain upheavals that took place in society, certain cataclysmic events. Okay? In fact, engaging with the happenings in the history of a region has been a major concern of literature in recent times. There has been a historical turn in fiction writing, especially an exercise in memorialization since the Second World War. Literature has been concerned with commemorating certain world events, recording for posterity certain events, certain experiences which shook different parts of the world. The past has been delved into to unearth little known aspects of it, to record individual memories, and to find out the genesis of particular problems so as to shape the future. So the past is not something dead and gone. The past throws light on the present. The past, present, and the future are now seen as inextricably intertwined, seen as a continuum. Alan Robinson talks about the present past and argues that at any given moment, several dimensions of time coexist in present consciousness. I would also like to introduce an idea of Dominic Lecapra, who wrote this book, Writing History, Writing Trauma. He talks about two approaches to historiography. One is the documentary research model, which involves collecting evidence and making truth claims based on that evidence. So, documentary research model. Capra claims that, as opposed to the documentary method, Narratives in fiction may also involve truth claims on a structural or general level by providing insight into phenomena such as slavery or the Holocaust. Okay? Stories, narratives, tales, they can also throw light on phenomena such as slavery or the Holocaust. So the tales, narratives are also getting valorized now as providing insight into history, things which happened in the past. By offering, they can, by providing insight into phenomena such as slavery or the Holocaust, by offering a reading of a process or period, or by giving at least a plausible feel for experience and emotion, which may be difficult to arrive at through restricted documentary methods. Okay? Toni Morrison's Beloved on the Aftermath of Slavery falls in this category. In other words, fictional narratives also provide useful insights into the history of a period by making creative use of individual and collective memories. Although history and memory are seen as binary opposites, and history is valorized as the realm of critical rational inquiry, and memory is regarded as simplistic and confused, a critically tested memory can serve useful purpose and light up many dark alleys of the past. So memories are important, individual memories, collective memories. And there is, so the violent and unsavory aspects of the world's or a region's history have received literary and artistic treatment since times immemorial. So there's history, there's literature dealing with the world wars, with the Holocaust, with the 9/11 incident. While there's a body of public opinion against remembering instances which are likely to bring back and had better been forgotten, others say that posterity needs to remember the sacrifices made by ordinary human beings for particular causes. They need to be aware of the brutality human beings are capable of, making innocent people the victims of mindless violence. So we have memorials, the Holocaust Memorial Museum, the 9/11 Museum. So that is why there are memorials and museums dedicated to the victims of the Holocaust and the 9/11 incident. So while dedicating the Holocaust Memorial Museum to humanity, President Clinton said that the memorial will remind humanity about the brutality humans are capable of and will act as a warning to prevent recurrence of such incidents in the future. So I think it has also been said, the Carter Commission believed that Americans have a distinct responsibility to remember the Holocaust, not only because the US Army had liberated many camps, but also because America had stood by passively for years while the Nazis annihilated the European Jews. America, as a leader of the free world, must remember her indifference and work to prevent any such tragedy from happening again. So what the point I'm trying to drive at is that memorials serve some purpose, although they bring back some painful memories, yet they do serve a purpose. And literature is also a way of commemorating events and educating the next generation on the upheavals and incidents that took place in the past, whose benefits maybe people are enjoying now. That is the memory part. And also a trauma. Ours has been termed as a catastrophic age. the field of trauma studies, which developed in the 1980s and 90s, focused on studying the trauma associated with catastrophic events like the world wars, the Holocaust, the anti-colonial movements in different parts of the world, civil wars, and militancy in different parts of the world. Dominic Lacapra again observes trauma and its causes may indeed be a prominent feature of history, notably modern history, which should not be airbrushed or denied. There's also a growing realization that there has been too much focus on studying the experiences of the white Western world, and that the events of the non-Western world need to be recorded so that some link can be established between cultures. Krebs and Bulens talk about, I quote, the risk of ignoring or marginalizing non-Western traumatic events and histories and non-Western theoretical work, which may, I quote, assist in the perpetuation of Eurocentric views and structures that maintain or widen the gap between the West and the rest of the world. The colonial experience and the movements for national independence, for instance, that has got to be written about, and the cultures and histories of the non-Western world came to be inscribed. There is now an increasing recourse to the anecdote or the story to recover the voice of the marginalized and the abject. Mass movements which give rise to militancy have weighty causes, but most often the toll it takes on the lives of the people, especially the vulnerable sections, is overlooked. Literature is one of the ways in which the sacrifices and sufferings of communities, different communities, especially the marginalized sections like women and ethnic minorities, can be commemorated. And this is what the texts that I'm taking today do. Coming to my region, that the post-colonial focus, we have to study the happenings, the histories, the experiences of the third world, the post-colonial societies. Like other regions of the world, the northeastern region of India has its own unique history. Of course, it's notable for its natural beauty, the landscape, the cultural variety, the unity in diversity, etc., etc. Unique history, but also there is another side apart from the natural beauty and other things that we talk about. It has its unique history, which is characterized to a large extent by militancy and violence rooted in various geographical, socioeconomic, and cultural factors. With the signing of various accords, normalcy of a sort has returned to the region. But the events of the past are stored in the individual and collective memories of the inhabitants of the region and provide the background to much of the literature produced here. As Anne Whitehead remarks, I quote, the desire among various cultural groups to represent or make visible specific historical instances of trauma has given rise to numerous important works of contemporary fiction. I would also like to quote here Edward Said, something that he said in his book, Humanism and Democratic Criticism. He states, I quote, during the last years of the 20th century, the writer has taken on more and more of the intellectual's adversarial attributes in such activities as speaking truth to power, being a witness to persecution and suffering, and supplying a dissenting voice in conflicts with authority. Said also talks about, I quote, the special symbolic role of the writer as an intellectual testifying to a country's or region's experience. Countries or regions, thereby giving that experience a public identity forever inscribed in the global discursive agenda. The writer's responsibility to inscribe the experiences of a particular region. He stressed that women writers have the additional responsibility of documenting women's involvement in social and political upheavals, and in critiquing these upheavals from a women's perspective. Histories often document the events from a male perspective, and the achievements and contributions of women do not always receive much emphasis. Women writers have the responsibility of presenting their side of the story and how women fare after a momentous phase is over. Now, in fact, there are books. We have Robert Young, Post-Colonialism, a Historical Introduction, which records the involvement of women in the anti-colonial movements in various Asian, Latin American, and African countries like Vietnam, Palestine, Cuba, Nicaragua, Algeria, etc. And it has been said that in Ghana, women traveled to many towns and villages and helped to build solidarity for a cause through their work at the grassroots. Women's involvement in agriculture and different physical activities in which they were engaged in their day-to-day lives built up their strength and independence and made them capable of participating in agitations and even engaging in guerrilla warfare. Kumari Jayawardena, in her book Feminism and Nationalism in the Third World, also discussed the rise of feminism in Asia and women's involvement in the social and political movements in the late 20th and 19th and 20th centuries, the nationalistic struggles, working class agitations, peasant rebellions, and formation of women's organizations in countries like Egypt, Iran, Turkey, China, and Japan. So that's about. Now, yeah. So Assam went through, as various regions of the country and the world, a troubled phase in the 80s and 90s. So in fact, although there was a lot of suffering here amongst the people, but Assam got to be known. In fact, it hogged the national headlines because of the happenings in the region. So the main issue, of course, I think everyone knows, was the issue of illegal, was the issue of migration from neighboring countries, which posed a threat to the identity of the Assamese people. There were fears that they would be reduced to minorities in their own state. So it was a all Assam Students Union led hesitation to solve this issue of foreign nationals and the revision of the electoral rolls. So the problem continues, and recently we also had hesitation over the Car Citizenship Amendment Act. So looking back on those days has become it has become a practice of some writers. Many writers have based their works on that turbulent phase, when there were blackouts, when there were processions, mass demonstrations, picketings, employees not going to their offices, students boycotting classes, leading demonstrations in the streets. So it was a turbulent phase. And after that, we had the reign of terror by a militant organization. Many of us, we were young at that point of time. We were school-going kids or in colleges, and we remember that phase. That phase is inscribed in the collective memory of the people of the state and the region, and many people have their own individual memories. So my concern here is to look at what aspects of that history, okay, the student-led agitation and the rise of the ULFA, what aspects of this history have found their way into the literary texts which have been produced in the region? What are the different perspectives that they bear on the events of the past? And I have taken, I'm going to consider women writers as well as male writers, and I would like to look at how the two perspectives differ, how the representations differ of the women writers as well as the male writers. So the writers that I have chosen are women writers: Rita Chaudhary, Arupa Patangya Kolita, Mitra Fukan, Ruby Kotoki. And among the main writers, I'll be concerned about, I'll be talking about Orun Horma, who has one novel. It discusses other things also, but there is a sizable part of the novel is concerned with militancy and its fallout. So first, I would like to talk about Rita Chaudhary. I think she's well known because she was a member of the National Book Trust, and she won the Sahitya Academy Award for her novel Deo Longkai. Now, and she is particularly important because she was herself involved with the agitation. She had taken part in the agitation, and she had, I think, quoted arrest. And the two novels that I will be concerned with, but I will not be able to quote from her novels. She has written her novels, the novels which I will be concerned with, in Assamese. I'll be in Assamese, so I will not be able to, and they have not been translated into English. So I will not be quoting, but I will talk about those novels. And the two novels are Obirata Jatra and A Homoy, Hey Homoy. So this time, so looking at those times from the perspective of the present. So Obirata Jatra, it was actually a novel that was written, it was submitted, there was a Assam Sahitya Sabha. Assam Sahitya Sabha, it asked people to write. Yeah, there is a disturbance. I'm actually hearing voices. Now I think it is okay. I heard some voices. So it was written, this novel in Assamese. It was written as, it was submitted to a competition. The competition was on, people were asked to write novels with the agitation as the background, and Obirata Jatra won the first prize in that competition. So what I find among these, among the women writers, is that they take women as protagonists, except Ruby Kotoki. She's a woman writer. She has a male protagonist, and Mitra Fukan, Rita Chaudhary, Arupa Patangya Kolita, they have women as protagonists, so women's experiences. And again, there is a difference women representations of the agitation. Rita Chaudhary, perhaps because she herself was involved with the agitation, she has very active women characters in the agitation. So here, I think in the first novel, Obirata Jatra, she has this woman character called Prithvi, who is actively associated with the agitation. She travels to different parts of the state, mobilizing people and doing a lot of work. In fact, Assam has a tradition of women's participation in active public life, right from the agitation, like from the independence movement. We had a number of very active women. We have Sandra Prabha Hoikiani, who took part in that agitation, and we have a number of women organizations, a number of women Mohila committees, which were active during the independence struggle, and also now doing a lot of work. So we have this very active woman characters called Prithvi, who mobilizes people, delivers lectures, addresses public gatherings, So she is very active, and then, but it's a retrospective kind of account. She looks back on her life. So it's one technique that is used by these writers. There's not much of technical innovation, but we have this technique of using flashbacks, juxtaposing the past and the present. Okay? And the organization that spearheads the movement, that is called Matrihanga. The woman as the center, Matri, the mother, the valorization of the mother. So it is supposed to be Matrihanga, and even after the agitation is over, the Matrihanga is supposed to be active. Okay? So various things are described. The slogans associated with the movement, the demons, the violence unleashed by the police, all these things are recorded, and they are all young people who are participating in the agitation, young people, and how they mobilize different sections of course, there are problems in forging the unity that is required. Various questions are raised regarding who is an Assamese. So literature as a way of, so they keep alive, these writers keep alive a momentous phase in Assam's history, a momentous phase in Assam's history, and they it's an evaluative kind of exercise. What did the movement gain for us? The pros and cons, and towards the end, we find this character. What does she achieve? Many of the young people who participate, they don't end up well. We have one character, Somiron, who is killed. There's another character, Joseph, who becomes a cripple, and then there's another Ohanto, who becomes a diseased man because of long periods of confinement in prison. So while the agitationists sacrifice their youth, suffer in various ways, and end up dead, diseased, or lonely. Prithvi is lonely. Prithvi marries Okanto, who is also involved in the hesitation, but Okanto dies. So she's lonely in the end. They end up dead, diseased, or lonely. Their good work is carried on by another generation of youngsters. So the agitationists do not end up well. They suffer a lot, okay, because of their idealism. But their good work is carried on by another generation of youngsters. It is they who keep Matri Sangha, an organization which was originally formed during the heydays of the hesitation, alive 21 years after its formation and carry forward its good work. So Prithvi writes about the hesitation. She becomes a writer when she's lonely. Okay? And she has another generation of youngsters coming to her, asking for her subscriptions to their, asking for her contributions to their magazine, and so on and so forth. So various things, and the kind of unity that is sought to be forged among the different communities, the Tiwas, the Nepalis, the Kosh Rajbankis, the tea garden workers. So there are characters belonging to different segments of society, and they were all working together on this issue. So we have a very active hesitationist, a woman character, a woman protagonist. So in the other novel A Homoy He Homoy, that is also by Rita Chaudhary. So she has another character, another protagonist whose name is Aditi Chaudhary, and she was also a participant in the hesitation. She gets married to another fellow agitationist called Chandan Phokar. But she gets disillusioned with the kind of, with the turn of events after the hesitation. The regional party comes to power. There is nothing much gets done. Okay, nothing much gets done. So Aditi is forced to walk out of her husband's house. She cannot support his policies. She does not realize that in politics, you have to take the help of money and muscle power and so on and so forth. The high idealism of the hesitation days goes, and then Aditi is frustrated, and she walks out of her husband's house. So we see a kind of resistance to politics, a woman's resistance to often male-dominated politics, vitiated by money and muscle power and unscrupulous alliances of convenience. But then she sets out on her lonely journey. She has two daughters. She takes up a job as a college teacher, and then her past catches up with her present. Okay, in the college, the students, the children of her friends from the hesitation days, they study in that college, and she again he comes into contact with all her former friends. They relive the days of the past. They recall the incidents. They discuss the issues once again. So that is how, and she narrates the stories to her daughters, and who find it difficult to believe that such things happened at one point in the history of the state, and that her mother was involved with those issues, with that phase of the state's history. So the impact of the hesitation on different aspects of social life is also touched on. Okay, sorry. So is touched on, just as during the struggle for independence from the British, women who were mostly indoors came out of their homes to participate in the hesitation. So also during the Assam, including women, came out of their homes in large numbers. There was a revolution of sorts so far as gender relations were concerned, as boys and girls mixed freely for a higher cause. Now, so particularly notable particularly notable in both novels is the redefinition of femininity that came to be, and what came to be, what can be termed as the emergence of the new woman. Their active involvement in the movement make Aditi and Prithvi different from other women who perform stereotypical roles. So the redefinition of femininity, women participating in the agitation, coming out into the public sphere, as had happened during the movement for national independence. So Aditi and Prithvi, Rita Chaudhary's characters, they are different from other women who perform stereotypical roles. So that it is worth noting, we see many facets of Aditi. Aditi is an educationist, mother, wife, teacher, and career woman. She mediates different identities. Although she is not able to lead a normal family life, she has a large circle of friends. It is worth noting that their experiences of public life during the agitation help both Prithvi and Aditi to face the trials of life and stand on their own feet without the support of men. So she charts her own independent life, that independent streak in her. So thus, through her first-hand experience of the Assam agitation, Rita Chaudhary revisits and reconstructs through memory an important phase in Assam's recent history and provides a woman's perspective on events. The 1980s was not only a time when Assamese subnationalism was at its height and questions on various aspects of Assamese identity came to be raised, but also a time when gender relations came to be redefined. As women came out of the confines of their homes, participated in public life, and exercised their independence on various fronts. However, as in the case of the freedom movement, they were excluded from the exercise of political power, end up being solitary and vulnerable, carrying the burden of memory throughout their lives. So although Aditi and Chandan, they were both agitationists, Chandan becomes a minister in the regional government that is formed, and Aditi becomes a housewife. She's just a housewife, but later she walks out of Chandan's household. Because she cannot stand the things happening, and she walks out of the house, and she takes up a job, and she has a life of her own, looking after her daughters and so on, teaching, and then catching up with her former friends, reliving those days, helping each other. Although she's solitary, she has a large circle of friends, many of whom were fellow agitationists at one point of time. So Rita Chaudhary has very active women characters. Now, Mitra Fukan and Arupa Bhattacharya Kalita, in them we see more the victimhood of women, the way they suffer rather than their active side. Because the collector's wife, Mitra Fukan, she writes in English, and that phase of our state's history is enacted again in the collector's wife, the abductions, the extortions by the militants, all that that happened, the trauma, the death of people. So living here in Parbatpuri, I've come to respect life and birth. Life is so cheap here. Death is everywhere. This is from the collector's wife. Sudden death, like dairies, long drawn out deaths, agonizing ends as life seeps out, drop after painful drop. So why are writers writing about these things? Notice is associated with all this, and why am I talking about these things? But then that phase, writers are trying to commemorate that phase in their writing. Writers have chosen to write there. write about them, write about that phase. Death is everywhere. Sudden death, like Dewey's long drawn out deaths, agonizing ends as life seeps out drop after drop through bullet holes in the body. Okay? And the plight of women there suffering with all the dead bodies. And tears for all the other women who stood over still, pale bodies, who stood over still, pale bodies, women as sufferers, women as having to, being at the receiving end because husbands, brothers, others, the men, they are dying because of the violence that is taking place. Tears for all the other women who had stood over still pale bodies as she herself was standing. Nandini Dewey and so many others, all coalescing into a single figure of tear-shrouded grief as they looked down at the slain bodies of their husbands, their brothers, their sons, wrapped in blood-blotched sheets. Of course, there are redeeming features. We have Nandini Dewey, whose husband is gunned down, husband who is a superintendent of police, he's gunned down. But then Nandini Dewey, she sets up a bakery, she becomes an entrepreneur. So she carves out an identity of her own, even as she is trying to, she does not collapse. She was a mere housewife, the SP's wife, looked after very well. But then after her husband's death, she has to look after her children, she has to look after the house, and she does not succumb under the pressure. She becomes an entrepreneur and she stands on her feet. So that side is also there of women trying to cope, trying to come up, trying to respond to the demands of the situation. So that we have collector's wife, and then we have Orupa Patangia Kolita, who has this written in tears. It was written in Assamese, but then it has been translated into English, a number of stories, which I think, talk about how women suffer, So these things are perhaps brushed aside, but then she makes a story. And how I would like to read, why do we go to literature for history, for things that happen, the secret killings? So one thing that we find in all these writings, some commonalities that they touched on. I still have to go to Orun Horma Hongkolpo. They talk about extortions, kidnappings, because the militant organization, they need to buy arms, they need to get their cadres trained, they need money, extortions. I mean, it runs through all the stories, runs through all the novels, businessmen, tea companies, tea executives, doctors, engineers, and the oil companies, extortions, kidnappings, and also one thing that happened, we talk about innocent suffering here in written in tears. The family members of young men who joined the ULFA, they suffered a lot. They were annihilated. That was a phase. But here, Arunima's motherland, the first story. The poignancy with which literature can bring alive certain situations, certain sufferings, especially of women. Women mostly, this Arunima is a housewife. The story begins with we see the poignancy, the metaphors, the use of contrasts, and it starts with a woman, Arunima, entering her husband's house as a newly married woman, and how she admires the flowers of the house, how the different how she's made to feel at home, how they cook the food together, how they do things together, the unity in the family, how she's loved. And when she enters, all these questions, who does the gardening, she asks the question. And there's a beehive. Okay? When she enters the husband's house as a bride, the first time, okay? Her father-in-law, I think, makes that comment. The bees are building a hive. It is a very auspicious sign. Okay? The daughter-in-law coming, and the bees are building a hive. It is an auspicious sign. He said, looking at Arunima, he said, our house is blessed with a Lakshmi now. We are fortunate. On the second, when we reach the end of the story, I mean, the contrast between this happiness, this picture of domesticity, of happiness of every member of the house, helping each other, the thread of love and concern for each other that connects the members of the family. So how it snaps, how it snaps. So what is the flaw? A son of the family had disappeared. He had joined the band outfit. So now and then the police keeps coming, to question them. Has he visited his house? So that is a perennial kind of trauma for them. The police coming to the house, asking about the son who has disappeared and son who has perhaps joined the band outfit. Not only him, after the son disappears, not only him, the whole household seemed to have forgotten how to smile from the time the second son left the house. And then they could hardly sleep at night. And then all the comments from the neighbors, this is a house, this is a family who has a son as a criminal. There was, of course, the bombings, the destruction of the pipeline, oil pipeline, everything is there. And what is happens is the Orunima who enters the house as bride and becomes part of the household. She goes to her mother's house. She gives birth to a son. He gives birth to a son, but then something, and she is waiting for the members of her husband's house to fetch her and the son back to the house, because she has gone to her mother's house. But nobody comes because something terrible has happened. She waits and waits. Ultimately, she decides to go back to her husband's house on her own because nobody has come. And before this climactic thing happens, we have that metaphor of the bees who were building the hive when she entered the house. You wake up and see bees flying away from the honeycomb. Okay, the hint that something terrible is going to happen. And so at all the turns of the father, one of your sons has become a terrorist, and all that. So before she makes the journey back to her husband's house with the baby, okay, what are the things that she tells the baby? We are going to your father's house. She tells the baby. It's a baby, of course, does not understand. There are 2 aunts waiting for you in that house. If you fly away, turn into a swan under the spell of a witch, your aunts will wait for you, taking a vow of silence, and knit clothes with wild vines and make you human again. You have 2 aunts in that house. She tells her baby, you have an uncle. If a wicked wizard steals you and keeps you prisoner in a place on top of the mountains, your uncle will cross 7 seas and 13 rivers to free you. Okay, you have an uncle who will dote on you. You have a grandmother. If a witch turns you dumb by casting a spell, she will go round your bed for 7 days and 7 nights with a lighted earthen lamp in her palm without eating, without sleeping. She will bring your voice. She will bring back your voice. So that's the grandmother. You know you have a grandfather. If a demon infects you with a deadly virus, he will fly out of the land, bring the whole Gandhamadan hill as in Ramayana, and cure you with its medicine. Okay. Lastly, you have a father. For his prince, he will do anything. If you want a bird singing from the branches of a silver and golden tree, or if you want a bird made of diamond shining in the sun, he will sail in his peacock-tailed boat to go beyond the 7 seas, looking for it. In your hands will dance the bird made of diamonds, its eyes made of pearls, its wings will shimmer with precious stones. So she paints that very happy picture of the baby's father's house. She's in her mother's house. But yeah, when she goes, nobody has come to fetch her. When she goes herself in a car, what does she find? They crossed by the turning. The air was full of a rancid smell. Her journeying back to her husband's house with the baby. She thinks that everyone is waiting to welcome the baby. Rancid smell of burning. The house was just a few minutes from there. The car could not go forward. The road was full of people. Why are so many people here, leaving the town behind like a cremation ground? Police, military, and overwhelming burning smell. What happened? Who? Her house? She could feel her heart jumping up. And the house, what had happened to it? 3/4 of it was blown up. Blown up. Why? Because the son was an outlaw. Somebody, the relatives, the family members of outlaws. They were destroyed. So what she goes with a baby in her hands to have, how she finds the house burnt. It was bombed. It was bombed, and the mangled remains of the 2 aunts, the uncle, the grandmother, the grandfather, the father, lying all over the place. Some they were kind of the bodies were dismembered. Okay. She followed the eyes of the crowd and saw lying on the road 3 cloth bundles of burnt flesh. So this is the welcome that she gets. This is for no fault of hers. This is someone went to retrieve a hand stuck on the tree, a hand. The honeycomb was exactly there. The honeycomb, the honeys had built house. She threw herself in the half-burnt hand of a man. Now, what does she do now? So she introduces the baby to his father's family. Okay, father, the mangled remains of the bodies. Arunima stopped crying and looked around. Suddenly, like a mother holding a baby, she wrapped her hands around the mangled bodies. There was no sound as she cried, only her back was heaving up and down. Nobody dared to take away the burnt bundles from her. The baby started crying. Arunima now went to the unknown woman who was holding her baby, and taking him from her, she lay him beside the cloth bundles. She wanted to say, your, I mean, your father and his family. Words would not come out. She wept, her body racked by silent sobs. So this is what literature gives us. This is what history will, perhaps documentary history will not give. In the form of a story, Rupa Bhattacharya tells us the sufferings of the ordinary woman, ordinary people, for no fault of theirs, for some kind of high idealism that people have. The common people are not thought of, and they suffer. So the poignancy that there is in a particular experience of loss, of loneliness, of catastrophe that befalls the lives of the people, the contrast between the early image of happiness and the devastation towards the latter part of the story. So so I've talked about, and then we also have the victimhood of women. She's lonely. She doesn't know what to do now with a baby in her arms. She feels she's not welcome in her own house as well. Her sisters-in-law did not like her continued presence. Her parents' family had not come to fetch her because of the experience that they were undergoing in their house with police haunting them. Then we have Ruby Kotoki, who's a dentist, but she also records the different phases of the movement. Although she's a woman writer, she has a male protagonist whose name is Thonti, who's an ordinary man. And through his life story, she talks about different phases of the movement. She talks about different phases of the movement, the different issues. And the thing that she tries to say that it can't be, because his income suffers because of the buns. He has difficulties looking after his family. He has to get his son educated, but he has a car. It is used for the benefit of tourists in Kaziranga safaris. But then tourists have stopped coming, so Dhanti's income has suffered. He can't look after his family, can't provide for his son's education. So he wonders, can't we think of other ways of protesting apart from these hesitations, which cause a lot of harm to the ordinary people. So he is Ruby Kotoki. The another I wanted to talk a little. Perhaps I'm running out of time. We have Orun Horma's. It is called Hongkolpo. It's a story. I was, actually there was. I have this book, Strangers of the Mist by Sanjay Hazarkar. There's something what this Hongkolpo stresses on. It is actually based on, I think, a real incident. There was this NGO person, Sanjay Ghosh, who started work in Majuli for the benefit of its river island. There's erosion, the flood problem, there is erosion, there is lack of education at one point of time. It is cut off from the mainland, and Sanjay Ghosh descends there to work for the benefit of the people. But then he goes missing, he disappears, because he was building a huge support base there. And he came into clash with the Alpha, and he went missing, and later his dead body was recovered. And it is based on that incident. It was here also in Hongkolpo by Orun Horma. Orun Horma's novel, it touches on many other, it has a broad sweep. It's only towards the end of, it is written in Assamese, it's only towards the end of the novel that he touches on terrorism and insurgency. And then at the heart of it is this person called Pragyan Hunwal, who's a Rhodes Scholar. He has been abroad. He has 7 years. He was in London, but he comes back to Assam to a particular place called Dehapukuri, and there he starts social work, and he has a female. He has a woman, a friend with him, and her name is Malini. So they also build some kind of a support base, and they want to get going a World Bank project on building embankment there, because it has a flood problem. But then the way because he was building a support base among the people, they were insurgents in the area. He came into conflict with them, and then he's branded a raw research and analysis, raw as a CIA agent. He is there's a poster campaign against him, just as there's a poster campaign against Sanjay Ghosh in Majuli. So because these militants, they have their support base. If there's anyone else who tries to build an alternative support base, do work, get the people involved in something else. Take supporters away from them. That these people, like probably the NGOs, they earn the ire of the insurgents. And Pragyan Khanwal is killed. He's kidnapped and killed. And also the tea industry, how the tea industry suffered because of the extortions. Okay? There's in Strangers of the Mist, I actually have an incident there. The extortion, all these novels which have been written on the hesitation, on those hesitation days, 18 and 90s, we have kidnappings, abductions, extortions. We have and then we have several executives. We have a particular incident in which several tea executives, representatives of Tata Tea and Megor and others, they were taken to a secret place. They had to have conversation. They had conversations with these insurgents, because the tea industry bore the brunt of the extortion drive. And here also in Hongkolpo, we have Malini's elder brother. He's abducted, and then the family has to pay a lot of money. So we have, I think I'm running out of time. So these are all narrated. These are narrated as IS officer. There's a IS officer called Ranjit Sinha who talks about how these tea executives, how the tea industry faced the brunt of it, how they had to stop, some of them had to stop operations, how the economy of the state suffered because of it. So Hongkolpo is another one. The main protagonist, dies. He fails to do the work, the developmental work that he wanted to do. In spite of, he doesn't stay back in London. In spite of all this, but he comes back to serve people of. They have to be back, but he runs into conflict with the insurgents because he was becoming popular. He wanted to start that World Bank project and all that. And then he wanted to get the people to work on the project, because that was one of the conditions why the World Bank wanted to fund this project. People have to be involved. They have to do part of their work. They have to render their manual labor. So they were trying to get the people together, get the solidarity of the people. That's how they came into conflict with the militants. He's branded a raw agent, a CIA, and then he's abducted, he's killed. All these things happen. There is an evaluative, or the undertone of evaluation. What did, in fact, these questions are asked even in Ruby Kote, what benefits did we get out of it? The looking back part, how people suffer because of these upheavals. Sometimes the innocence, women are sometimes they are innocent, sometimes they are participants. They are in the public space. They are along with men. They are fired by ideals. They deliver speeches. They mobilize people. In other words, they are doing their. So that is one side, the active side, taking part in public life, and then you have the other side, women, housewives, leading their lives, and they are leading their lives, looking after their families, not understanding much about the outside world, why the hesitation is taking place at all, what are the issues. But then they are sometimes molestation, rape, tortures by the army, by the police. And if a man of the house is an insurgent, they are questioned, they are interrogated, they are made to stand in the fields, and they have to bear all kinds of sufferings. So these and the evaluative function, what did we get out of it? Because the government which came to power They did not fulfill the aspirations of the people. So there are different points of view, the different characters who would give their views on different sides of the hesitation. I think should stop. I would like to stop here. So, how recent history, 80s, events of the 80s, 90s, early 90s, how they have inspired literary work in this region, as in other parts of the world, social upheavals, they inspire literary and artistic creations. Here also a number of novels by men as well as women, male as well as female writers. They have women writers. They have taken these movements as a background to their works. They have evaluated. They have considered things from different points of view. They have considered the impact of these social upheavals on different sections of society. Women writers have been very sensitive to the ways that women have been affected by these things. So that's how the literature of my part has been affected, how the writers have responded to these things, how they have placed these matters before the public, how they have tried to commemorate a particular phase in Assam's recent history. The problems remain, many problems have not been solved. We are still the issues that we raised by the hesitation, they remain. That's what I and of course, why what is the speciality of literature as giving history? Okay, with a lot of feeling, with metaphors, with the use of contrast images. I mean, they make a particular experience very poignant, which perhaps a documentary, the historic books of history books, they may be very informative, but the feelings, experiences, sensations, the fear, the trauma, that can be rendered only by the literary texts. It's very, so that is the final point that I would like to make. I don't know. Thanks for your patience with me. I would like the organizers to take over now. I think I have exhausted my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manushi Bora, for giving a very elaborate analysis of on the topic that was assigned to you on the experiences of agitation, insurgency, the trauma and all. You have given a lot of examples also. So it was a wonderful session. We have got a lot of comments about your session in the feedback in the chat box. And they're all saying they have enjoyed your session thoroughly. And they're asking for such programs in future also. So that shows how your session had an impact on the participants. So now it is time for questions and discussion. Those who have questions, you can post your questions in the chat box. We can take some of the questions. There were a few questions in the YouTube as well. There are about 500 people who are watching in the YouTube as well. So one of the participant, Saumya Tiwari, she had asked the question, okay, how is trauma treated in post-independent literature? But you have dealt many of those things in your discussion. Another question is from Jayashree Madam. She has asked to touch upon poetry from Assam. So that was her question from the YouTube. From the Zoom, you can post your questions. Those who have questions, you can also raise your hand. Dr. Alok Chandra. Just a minute. I've just Dr. Alok, you'd like to ask a question?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Good afternoon, sir. This is Siddiq from
Okay, sir.
Madam. It was an excellent speech, and so many things were there to look into. I have got two questions, ma'am. One is, how do memory and trauma challenge history in Northeast Indian writings? And another one is, the second question is, are there any specific strategies or technical strategies employed by the Northeast writers to subvert the false notion of history?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shall I answer now or later?
You can answer, madam.
Yeah, the techniques. Yes, there was a question on poetry. I think poetry also needs special attention. I think poetry is a lot more equipped to deal with these emotions, with emotions, these charged experiences. But I have not looked at poetry. I think it needs, I will need some more time to do the poetry part. I was involved with the fiction. It's a very good question, because poetry is to do with so far as charged feelings are concerned. So I will look at poetry too. I'm sure there's a whole lot of poetry that deals with all these the experiences of the agitation. And technique, so far as the novels written in the regional language are concerned, they have not done so much experimentation with technique. It's a social realist kind of narration, because the issues are important. The content is important, and the technique that I think that they are using is this flashback, the past and the present, because they're retrospective, is looking back on those events. So we have this technique of past and the present juxtaposed. This thing, but more often it's social realism. Of course, as I said, in Orupa Patangnya Kolita, the images that are used, the colors that are used, the greenery that is used as a contrast to what is the green and the red. I think in Mitra Fukan, we have two deaths towards the end of the novel. We have the river turning red because there's so much blood. But as opposed to that, we have greenery. The greenery, and the protagonist walks out and she gets some solace in the greenery. So those traditional, the symbolism, and then there's the crematorium. There's the use of the crematorium there in Parvatpuri, because there was so many deaths and the stench of burning. And opposed to that, you have the voices of the children on the other side of the crematorium. How the opposites are, small children crying in joy, how opposites are juxtaposed, life and death. So these are some of the techniques that are fun. But yeah, of course, there is some kind of rendering of the inner turmoil. Monologues of the characters. I think in Ruby Kotoki's Andulan, the name of her novel is Andulan. We have a man who is not very educated, and he does not understand many of the issues, and what he is only concerned with. What are all these things, these blackouts, what is it going to do to me? my life, my children. So he is given to that brooding over the world of the mind. His thoughts, can't people think of, what do they, there have been so many deaths, so many young people have died. What have we achieved? Can't we think of other ways of protesting so that the common life, ordinary life is not disrupted? We earn our daily bread easily. He doesn't have a permanent job. He does some business. So rendering of the thoughts in the mind of an individual. So that is there, a kind of interior monologue. But then we have imageries. We have the use of the color, we have contrasts, we have similes, metaphors. These are there, but not very radical kind of experimentation that we find in the technique.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
I don't know whether that answers that question.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's very nice.
There is another question in the chat box. Ma'am, are there any works which portray the trauma and insurgency from a Bodo perspective?
Books that from a broader, there are lots of trauma theorists. Trauma theorists, you have people like Kathy Caruth, Shoshana Feldman, Dory Lobb, but there are Western theorists who have talked about trauma. Kathy Caruth, Shoshana Feldman, Dory Lobb. Kathy Caruth has this book, Unclaimed Experience, Trauma, Narrative, and History. Lots of articles on post-colonial trauma fiction. There are lots of, Dominic Lacapra has this book, Writing History, Writing Trauma. Then we have, Anne Whitehead. Anne Whitehead has this book, Trauma Fiction. Trauma Fiction. And then I had this article from JSTOR, Steph Krebs and Gert Dulin's Introduction to Post-Colonial Trauma Novels. So there's a lot of trauma that is, there have been a lot of trauma theorists. But I don't know in the third world, trauma in the third world, I have to look at that. There are lots of articles, there are lots of books, but Kathy Caruth, Shoshana Feldman, Dory Lobb, they are the ones, Dominic Lacapra, Writing History, Writing Fiction. I'm sure there are lots of others.
There is
Hello, ma'am.
there is a question.
Can you hear me? Yeah, ma'am. It's got my question wrong.
Can we see? Do I have
question? Hello, ma'am. Yeah, my question was that whether we have any perspective from the other ethnicities within Assam, like Boro, Mishing, Bengali, like that.
Pardon, other? I didn't hear that properly. Other?
Other ethnic groups. Other ethnic groups within Assam.
Yeah, there are lots of other ethnic groups in Assam, apart from the Assamese speaking people. There are the Boros, there are Missings, there are Tiwas, there's a Nepali speaking community, there are tea garden laborers. So it's a mosaic of the different groups of people. So I think in one Obiroto Jatra, it tells us how the Prithvi tries to unite all these people. And the most important question of who is an Assamese? That is also is how to define and Assamese, when you have so many different groups living here. So defining that is the most important question that needs to be, it hasn't been answered once and for all. Okay? People who have come from other states, have been here for a long period of time. They have grandfathers, and even people before that maybe. Yeah, we have all people, Boros, Missings, Tiwas. And we have Rita Chaudhary's book, Deolang Kui, that is on the Tiwas. Okay, that fetched her the Sahitya Academy.
Okay, any other questions? There is one question from Dr. Jyoti Dolly. Do memory and trauma of loss shape our perspective in looking into our present?
Trauma as? Okay. Could you please ask? Do we?
Ma'am, okay.
Jyoti, madam, yes.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. And good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you for this beautiful presentation. Ma'am, ma'am, I just wanted to ask, like, I have two questions. First is like, do memory and trauma of loss shape our perspective in looking into our present time? Do they shape it? And if they, how do they? Is it positive or negative? And another thing is that, while we were like you were giving the presentation, I also observed that, like, home seems to be a troubled space, like, and in both ways, symbolically or as well as, in reality, like the home is a place which we consider to be a very a space of certitude, a place of, comfort, right, surety. But then what we find is that due to these terrorist issues, and then the constant visit of the police, that secured space is troubled, right? So how do people come to terms with this kind of, trauma that when they undergo it?
Yes, no, I was actually talking about, taking your second question first, I was talking about that phase, 80s, 90s, or maybe until 1990, early 90s. So in that phase, we have this home as secured space, we are kind of separated from the things happening in the outside world. So I was talking about that phase, hesitation phase, where the home came to be affected. It's not now. It's not now. So it is. So the history part of the title. So it was during those hesitation days when we had insurgency. It is not like that now. So when there are these social upheavals, when people are fighting for certain causes, there's the large scale involvement of the masses in particular issues. That there is insurgency. The home is kind of it comes to be invaded by the disturbances outside. I'm not talking that it's so disturbed now. I was talking about that phase. Yes, not for everybody. People who had maybe in the rural areas with army had its operation. We had two operations in the 1990 and 1991. Operation Bajrang and Operation Rhino, where villagers and the army went into the villages in search of militants and walking into people's homes and doing things. So I'm not really trying to paint that. I'm not trying to say that that kind of thing exists now. So these are it is a phase, and now writers are trying to capture the events of that phase, how the home also was not secure at one point of time. and the other thing was memory and trauma. So one has, yeah, of course, there are certain things individually, maybe some families were individually affected. A member was perhaps killed, a member was perhaps abducted. So trauma is something that haunts. If you're affected, collective memory, it goes. All of us, I lived through that phase. Yeah, it was there, but no family member was affected. So it was there, but I feel for others who suffered at that time. But then if you're individually affected, something happened to a member of the family, there is perhaps trauma is something that haunts. You think about, one thinks about it, and perhaps later on gets busy with other things, and that phase is gone. So the collective memory, and there's individual. If an individual is affected, if there's molestation or rape, there is a character in Written in Tears where her life is shattered for the rest of her life because she is molested. Okay? She doesn't get back her normal self, and her husband goes and marries another woman. So these things are there. Some people are better at coping with trauma, getting it over, getting on with life, getting busy with other things. Trauma affects different individuals differently. One doesn't know how each individual will react to it. So something, if it is very personal, it touches you personally, so something that happens to someone very close to you, it's difficult to get over that experience. We have individual memories, also collective memories. Okay, I have a collective memory of the things that happened. We got to know from newspapers, from the television, from people's discussions. So let me tell you that phase, it was 80s and maybe 90s. And sometimes there are, of course, extortions, kidnappings now, sporadic incidents. Let me not paint a picture that exists now and we are not able to go out in the streets. Of course, the pandemic, I'm not talking about that we are not going because of the pandemic, but that situation, it's troubled even now because of the insurgency. Of course, sporadic incidents are now and then, but then it was 80s and 90s, and the way that they are represented in the fiction that has been produced, I have to look at poetry, as someone has pointed out. I don't know whether I answered that question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
I think we'll have one more question. There's one question from Pooja. She's asking, can trauma theory be applied for Dalit literature?
Yes, I think so. It need not be, cataclysmic events, catastrophes, major catastrophes, and then trauma. It could be, when your self-esteem is hurt. You go somewhere, you are not respected as a human being. Your dignity is hurt. If these are also instances of trauma in everyday lives, we don't realize it. It need not be huge hesitations and then bomb blasts and kidnappings of family members also to induce trauma. It could be the everyday treatment that a person gets from people. The esteem, if you are constantly, if you are looked at in a particular way, the treatment that you get is not what you expect as a human being. That could also be trauma. So I think the Dalit experience can be looked at from that angle. So everyday experiences could be traumatic for individuals.
Okay, thank you. I think there is one raised hand. Let that be the last question.
Yes, sir.
Dr.
Thank you.
Sariful Amin, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Madam, thank you very much for your valuable inputs on HMT in recent literary texts. Very happy, ma'am, about the session. Ma'am, can you share some famous regional works of Assam translated in English, ma'am? I want to know more about regional works of Assam, which are
Okay.
translated in English.
Translated into
English.
English.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
From
I
Assam.
think Orupa Patangya Kolita, she
Okay,
has a book written in tears, is actually translated into English. And here she has another book, Helani, which has also been translated into
Helani.
English. We have a lot of fiction which has been translated into English. But a lot remains to be done. Pradeep Acharya, he's a good, well-known translator. Many books have been translated, but I don't know because Rita Chaudhary Sahitya Award. I think Birendranath Bhattacharya's Yorungam also that won the Jnanpith, that has also been translated.
Okay.
And in the Sahitya Academy, Deolangquid, that Rita Chaudhary's book, Sahitya Academy had taken the initiative to translate it into English. I don't know whether it has seen the light of day. So Sahitya Academy is taking that initiative to get works of Assam into translation. Many are in the pipeline. Poetry has also been translated.
Okay.
Pradeep Acharya, who taught in Cott College at one point, he has translated a lot of poems into English.
Yes, ma'am. I have noted names of the authors, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, dear participants, for the questions. And I also thank Dr. Manishi Bora for spending so much time to answer the questions. There are many more questions, but we don't have much time. So let me end now. Before we end, let me request our first year MA participant, Mr. Abin, to propose the formal vote of thanks.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. A pleasant good afternoon to one and all present in this webinar session. On behalf of Nesamani Memorial Christian College, I take this opportunity to propose the vote of thanks to those who have directly and indirectly contributed to this webinar section on the topic History, Memory and Trauma in Recent Literary Text, organized by PG English Association and IUQAC of Nesamani Memorial Christian College. First of all, I thank the God Almighty for His blessings to make this webinar section successful. Then I would like to thank the chief guest and resource person, Dr. Manishi Bora, Associate Professor in the Department of English at Gauhati University, Assam. Ma'am, we are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence and the way how you explain the importance of history, memory and trauma, and also how it have influenced literature. I hope this section might have really widened all listeners' idea related to this topic. I thank you once again, ma'am, for your excellent speech. Next, I would like to thank the correspondent of our college, Advocate L. Rajadurai, and our principal, Dr. K. Paul Raj, for their motivation and enthusiastic supports for organizing this seminar. And also a special thanks for our HOD, sir, Professor T.B. Thomas, for his valuable efforts in organizing this webinar. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the teachers and research scholars who have actively participated in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Abin. And once again, I thank Dr. Manishi Bora for this wonderful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
And so I also, before we end, I also like to share our apologies also because we couldn't accommodate more than 100 in the beginning. That was actually our carelessness. We thought, okay, we have the 500 capacity Zoom, but after the session only we noticed that now we have about 260 participants in Zoom, And there are about 500 participants who have watched in YouTube. I know some of you would have missed the session because of the technical issue. I request you that you can watch this program in the YouTube also. It will be posted there. So you can watch that. Those who have missed the initial part of this webinar, you may watch it again in the YouTube, IQAC NMCC. Thank you. Thank you, one and all. There are a lot of participants from the other countries also. I could see people from Philippines, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Iraq. Okay, there are actually in the registration we had about representation from 17 countries and from all the states. So I was so happy that there was such a tremendous response. 2,000 responses we had when we started the program. We had 2,000 registrations. But we couldn't accommodate more in the Zoom in the beginning. So we apologize again for that. This is a wonderful session. I'm sure all of you have benefited by that. And I can see that in the response that you have given in the chat box about the kind of session that you have enjoyed. So all the credit goes to our resource person, Dr. Manishi Bora. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
ஹெச்ஓடி எவ்வளவு வெட்டியா இருந்தா அன்னைக்குள்ள 2.5 மணி நேரம் ப்ரோக்ராம் உட்காந்து பார்த்துருக்கேன். ஆமா.
To the attention of the participants watching the program in YouTube, the feedback link is posted there. Now kindly check the feedback, the link which is posted right now. You can click on that link which is posted now. It is working. You can submit your feedback.